What's going on, everybody? Hope y'all are doing good. Glad you're back. Tonight we're going to start a new series. I'm going to tell y'all a story about God. It's going to start before creation and end in the future. Yeah, so I think it's going to be a pretty cool series. Probably end up being about 10 videos or so. And hope y'all get something out of it. Look forward to hearing from y'all. All right, so let's get started. The story. Before there was a universe, before there was time, before there was matter or energy or space itself, there was relationship. God was not alone. Scripture reveals that from the beginning there was God and there was the Word. They existed together eternally, distinct yet perfectly united. They were not rivals, they were not equals in conflict. They were of one mind, one purpose, one will. Their relationship was defined by love, cooperation, order, and harmony. Authority existed but not oppression. Unity existed but not uniformity. There was structure but not coercion. There was leadership but no rebellion. This was not a static existence. It was living, active, creative relationship. God and the Word shared purpose. They shared understanding. They shared joy. Scripture reveals that the Word was with God and was God, fully participating in the divine existence, fully aligned with God's will. Their relationship reflected everything God would later desire for His creation: trust, faithfulness, communication, submission without resentment, authority without tyranny, love without selfishness. From the beginning, God's way was relational. God did not create because He was lonely. God created because He desired to expand what already existed. Family, relationship, shared purpose. The plan of God was never merely about creating beings. It was about reproducing His way of life. Before creation ever began, there was order. There was law. There was righteousness. There was truth. These were not invented later. They flowed naturally from who God is and how God lives. Law did not exist apart from relationship. It existed to preserve it. Out of that perfect unity, God and the Word chose to create. They first brought into existence a realm beyond the physical, a spirit realm. Angels were created, not as equals with God, but as servants within His administration. They were given intelligence, power, and responsibility. They were not created as family, but as helpers, messengers, and administrators of God's will. God is a God of order, and the spirit realm reflected that order. Within the angelic realm were ranks and roles. Some were entrusted with greater authority, others were others with specific responsibilities. Scripture reveals archangels, beings of immense power, assigned to guard, to deliver messages, and to carry out God's commands. Among these beings was one who stood out in brilliance, capability, and position. His name was Lucifer. Lucifer was created with extraordinary beauty and wisdom. He was entrusted with authority and responsibility. He was not created evil. He was not created flawed. Scripture describes him as perfect in his ways from the day he was created until iniquity was found in him. What changed was not his creation, but his thinking. Lucifer began to admire himself. Pride took root. Instead of rejoicing in the order established by God, he began to resent it. Instead of delighting in his role, he desired a different one. He wanted authority that was not given to him. He wanted to elevate himself rather than reflect God's glory. Rebellion always begins with dissatisfaction toward order. Lucifer rejected the structure that had preserved harmony. He convinced himself that God's way was limiting, that independence would lead to greater fulfillment. And once that thought took hold, it spread. Scripture reveals that many angels followed him in rebellion. The result was destruction. The earth, created under angelic administration, became devastated. Scripture shows it became without form and void, covered in darkness, submerged in chaos. God did not create it that way. Disorder is the inevitable outcome of rejecting God's authority. Yet God did not abandon his plan. God is patient. God is deliberate. God allows choice, but he remains sovereign. Where rebellion brought ruin, God moved to restore. God reshaped the earth. Light pierced the darkness. Order replaced confusion. Land emerged from the waters. Life returned in abundance. Each step reflected intention, not improvisation. But the earth itself was not the end goal. Then God said something he had never said before. Let us make man in our image, after our likeness. This statement reveals purpose. Man was not created as another animal, nor as another servant like the angels. Man was created to reflect God's nature, to learn his way, develop his character, and ultimately become part of his family. God formed man from the dust of the ground. His body was physical, temporary, mortal, but God breathed into him the breath of life, imparting not just animation, but mind. Man was given the ability to think, reason, choose, create, and communicate. Man was made lower than God, yet offered something extraordinary, the potential to become like God. From the beginning, God's plan for humanity was relational. God spoke with man, God instructed man, God walked with man. There was openness, trust, and peace. Humanity lived under God's authority, not as slaves, but as stewards. God gave man responsibility over the earth. Authority was delegated, but accountability remained with God. This reflected the same principle that existed between God and the Word. Authority exercised within unity and trust. God also created woman, establishing the foundation of family. Humanity was not meant to exist alone. God's plan was relational at every level, divine, human, and communal. Everything God, everything God provided was good, but God did not force obedience. God did not remove choice. Love requires freedom, and freedom requires the possibility of rejection. In the garden stood two trees that represented two paths. One was the tree of life, symbolizing reliance on God, obedience to his instruction, and trust in his judgment. The other was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, symbolizing independence from God, deciding right and wrong apart from him. God explained the choice clearly. He warned of the consequences. Obedience would lead to life, rejection would lead to death. Once again, the same adversary appeared. Satan, the former Lucifer, approached humanity not with force, but with deception. He questioned God's motives. He suggested that God was withholding something good. He implied that independence would lead to enlightenment rather than separation. Humanity believed the lie. Adam and Eve chose to define good and evil for themselves. They rejected trust in God's judgment and embraced self-determination. And with that choice, the relationship God intended was broken. Shame entered the human experience. Fear replaced trust. Humanity hid from God. Separation followed. Death became inevitable. Yet even then, God revealed mercy. God did not destroy mankind. He did not abandon his purpose. Instead, he revealed that this failure had been anticipated. A deliverer would come, one born of humanity, yet perfectly aligned with God, one who would undo the deception, defeat the adversary, and restore what had been broken. History from that point forward was no longer random. It became the unfolding of redemption. Outside the garden, humanity multiplied, and so did the consequences of rejecting God's way. Violence increased, pride flourished, human knowledge expanded, but wisdom diminished. Civilization advanced, but character eroded. The first recorded act outside the garden was murder. Cain killed Abel. This was not an anomaly, it was the natural result of a world cut off from God's guidance. Corruption spread. Scripture tells us that human thoughts became continually evil. The earth filled with violence. God observed what humanity had become, and it grieved him. Yet God preserved hope. God found one man, Noah, who was willing to listen, to trust, and to obey. Through Noah, God preserved human life and demonstrated a principle that would echo throughout history. God works through those who respond to him. After the flood, humanity was given another beginning. But once again, mankind chose independence. Instead of obeying God's instruction to spread across the earth, humanity gathered together in defiance. They sought unity without God, power without submission, greatness without righteousness. This became the foundation of Babylon, a system built on human pride and rebellion. God intervened, confusing languages and scattering nations. Unity without God had once again proven destructive. The world fractured into nations, cultures, and systems. False gods were worshipped. Humanity searched for meaning, but rejected the source of truth. And then God chose one man, not a ruler, not a king, a man willing to listen. His name was Abram. God called Abram out of a world steeped in false worship. God made promises to him, promises that extended far beyond his lifetime. Abram was promised descendants, land, and an inheritance that would ultimately bless all nations. Abram believed God. This moment marked the beginning of a focused phase of God's plan. From this family line would come a nation. From that nation would come instruction. From that instruction would come understanding. And from that understanding would come the need for salvation. God was not reaching to human failure. God was not reacting to human failure. He was executing a plan rooted in relationship, purpose, and love. The same God who existed in perfect unity with the Word from eternity past was now working patiently. Within time to bring was working patiently within time to bring humanity into the same family. And the story was only beginning. So that's actually the end of section 1, chapter 1, whatever you want to call it. Uh, I think I'll stop there and upload this video. It's about 17 minutes so far. And then continue on in the next video. I love y'all. Have a good night. And we'll see you on the next one. Bye.